Ann Malkar, Megan,
Oops.
and Ella Irfanian here as well. We're all board of directors for Wyss. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the questions that we have.
Okay,
So
great.
how this is going to work is we're going to go in order, and we're going to say questions first that we had come in from our attendees that are directed towards you. We're so excited to have you here. So our first question is, how would you describe USC's social environment? Specifically, were you forced to motivate yourself, or was it easy to align with common interest groups who provided peer motivation?
So, sorry, let me turn this. I'm getting chat messages from work. So the social environment at USC, that's what you're asking?
Yeah.
Kind of, okay. Yeah, so I guess one thing about biomedical engineering, we do have the most women in terms of all the engineering disciplines. So, and especially at the undergraduate level, it's about 50-50, if not even sometimes I feel like I see more women in my classes. Also in my lab, I always tend to have more women than men in my lab. At the faculty level where I am, it's not necessarily so 50-50. We still have more men than women, but actually a lot of the faculty hired kind of around the same time as me, we have more women than men. So so that's been great for, making me not feel like an outsider due to being a woman. So I think one kind of interesting thing so our department has more senior professors that are in kind of a very different type of area of biomedical engineering. So more kind of pacemakers, imaging, kind of more of like the more traditional fields of biomedical engineering. My lab, we work on tissue engineering. So we're, growing cells in the lab, we're working with stem cells, we're making materials and scaffolds. So it's a very different type of research. It still fits in this umbrella of biomedical engineering. So, culturally that can make me feel a little bit of an outsider, especially when I first started, just trying to get people in my department to understand what I do and why I do it. But we, in my department, they're very smart and they hired 3 faculty in this area, and we kind of shared lab space and all that. So I kind of had a cohort from the beginning of people around the same age as me in the same area that I could kind of lean on. So that's been really great. So definitely, I still lean on my peer network even at this age. So, that's something that continues throughout your life, and kind of finding those peers that you can really, be open with and rely on.
That's awesome. Like, it's great to hear that because, like, also as someone who wants to pursue biomedical engineering, it's really great to hear those connections are formed there.
Yeah.
All right, I'll pass it on to Megan Sinai, who's going to ask the next question.
Hi. The next question that was sent in is, what are your struggles you had/have in your field of work? If any struggles, did any of them have to do with being a woman?
Yeah. There's a lot of struggles and they change at different stages for sure. So like in graduate school, I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome, which is very common, especially in women. And I struggled a lot with always comparing myself and what I'm doing, how much I'm accomplishing compared to some of my peers. And especially in science, that can be really hard because we want to be, as a scientist or engineer, you want to do high risk work because you're trying to do innovative new things. So there's a lot of failure built into what you're doing. And so failure is actually part of the process. The problem is when failing and things aren't working, it kind of just feels like you're not making any progress and there's nothing to really show. You can't, you don't usually write a paper on stuff that fails, right? Maybe we should, but it's just not how we do things, right? So I think that was a big struggle in graduate school, but I really, I kept my head down and, a lot of people feel this way in graduate school. So after, in case you're not familiar, so you go to college for undergraduate, that's about 4 years. And then after that, I did a PhD program, which was 5 to 6 years, and that's about average. So it's a pretty long time. And generally like years 2, 3, 4 of that program, you're kind of in this muck. You feel like you're not accomplishing anything, things just aren't working, but that's actually part of your training. It's because you're learning you're testing new hypotheses that may not work out. You're getting the skills, you're building a new tool or technology to be able to collect the data that you need. So kind of pushing through that was a challenge, but then just the hard work did pay off, right? Things start working then towards the end of your PhD, and you get your papers and graduate and move on. So now as a professor, I have graduate students in my lab that I'm trying to help through that process, right? And so helping them kind of break through those challenges is there. As a woman, as a graduate student, I actually feel like I didn't feel any sexism really much at all. And I was in a pretty male-dominated lab. My professor was actually in the military, and it was a very very male feeling type of lab. But I felt like I was able to still be successful there. One thing I do feel now as a professor is there's still kind of a tendency for more of the kind of like secretary types of jobs to be pushed onto women. So like, oh, somebody needs to take notes, give it to the woman, right? Or send this email or like do those types of things. So there's still kind of that stereotype that holds for women. So, and sometimes it's not as common as it used to be for sure. But sometimes in meetings, I feel like my voice isn't always as heard as maybe the male voices are. So but it's also, I kind of just let it roll off my back, and I just try to find the people that I feel like do respect me for me and spend my time and energy and effort, working with those people.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's constantly getting better, but it's glad to hear from someone like you.
Yeah.
Next, I'm going to pass it on to Ann Mulcar.
So hello, thank you again so much for joining us. And the next question that was asked is, did you know what major you wanted to go into before college, and did you ever switch your major?
Yes, great question. So I always tell this story. So when I was growing up, I really liked art and Disney, and I'm still like a Disney fanatic. So I actually love living in Los Angeles because we're so close to Disneyland. So I wanted, I took a lot of art classes as a kid. I wanted to be a Disney animator, and that kind of morphed into like graphic design when I was around high school time. But I also really loved math and science through all that time also. So I was always, I did really well in math. I really I loved taking AP calculus. Like I really enjoyed it, but I just didn't see it as like, I want my career to do this. But I think maybe I just didn't have like that maturity yet. And then another big moment. So when I was in high school, I did like a undergrad graphic design program at Rhode Island School of Design to kind of like feel that out if I wanted to go that way for college. I liked it, but I didn't love it. And again, because I still really enjoyed my math and science classes, I picked a university that offered everything. So I went to Wash U in St. Louis, Washington University in St. Louis, because they have an art school, they had an engineering school, they have a medical school, that they have an architecture school. Architecture was another thing on my radar because it was like art and also math, right? So I chose a place where I knew I could kind of explore because I was kind of a little confused. So I actually started college as a graphic design major, and then during freshman orientation, I went to an intro to biomedical engineering session, and I loved it. I thought it was awesome. So it was science and math, all these subjects I knew that I was talented in, but applying to human health. And that really clicked for me. Like seeing those applications really made me more passionate about it. So I switched my major. I still, I took an art class here or there, and I still like to be creative. I think no matter what you do, there's opportunities to be creative in your field, right? So we publish papers and we have to put together graphs and schematics and cartoons of what we're doing. Like, I love that. That's like a therapeutic thing for me, is putting together those figures for our paper. So I still have that outlet, right? But yeah, it definitely was not something I really anticipated. And then even, as I went through college, I did try different research experiences also to kind of find what I liked. And I knew I wanted to go to graduate school pretty early on, but I didn't know I wanted to be a professor. That kind of came later too. So, there's no pressure to ever, fully commit to anything. So that's my story.
No, yeah, I think that was actually really great because you talked about how you explored so many of your different interests and how you still try to apply those in your life, even if that's not your actual career.
Yeah.
Well, I really like that. I'm going to be passing it on to Ella Irfanian.
Hi, thank you so much for your input again. So the next question that we have is, what was your educational journey and what made you pursue academia as a career?
Yeah, so I described a little bit. I'll go a little more detail, I guess. So, so I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and I went all through public school. When I was in ninth grade, my dad took a job in Boston, so I ended up moving to Boston when I was in high school and finished public school there. I went to WashU in St. Louis for the reasons I described, because I knew it was kind of a little bit open-ended, and then I was from St. Louis too, so I, it felt familiar to me. And I toured a lot of schools, and I picked WashU also because I just had a really good feeling when I was there. A lot of it comes down to just gut feeling. Like I saw myself there. It clicked with me. Then I started working in some research labs between sophomore and junior year. When I was a sophomore, I applied for internships for the summer, and I got an internship at Pfizer, working in like a drug screening area. So that was really my first like wet lab research experience, was between sophomore and junior year of college. And I liked it. I didn't really like working at Pfizer. It's kind of a little bit boring, to be honest. So, they're a huge company. And so depending on where you are in the company, right, you might be just doing kind of routine things over and over versus like really innovating and creating. So I didn't really love that experience, but I loved the lab work, like the hands-on lab work. I really enjoyed. So when I came back to campus, I found a professor that was also doing heart research. So I should say that the Pfizer was on like screening drugs if they cause problems with your heart. So then when I came back to campus, I found a professor doing heart research, but they were taking heart tissue from animals and optically mapping it. So putting a dye in it. So as the electrical signal went through the tissue, you could image that. I thought that was really cool. I loved how like dynamic it was. And it was like tissues and devices and imaging and data, like all combined together. I really liked that. So I also really liked the graduate students I was working with and like their lifestyle and just like what they were doing. And I could see like they got to be creative and take projects in the directions that they wanted to take them in. So that inspired me to go to graduate school. I applied to like kind of the top biomedical engineering programs. So this is like Johns Hopkins, Columbia, UCSD, thinking I would end up at one of those. But kind of in a roundabout way, the professor I was working for at WashU suggested this guy at Harvard was kind of a newer faculty working on heart, but from a tissue engineering perspective. And when I met him, the way he was talking about science and research and lab work was like totally different than anything I'd ever heard before. Just like a very different approach. He's the guy from the military, so just very different like personality type and different approach to science and research. And it really excited me. And it was, again, a gut feeling. Like I visited all these places and I was like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to decide. But then when I met him and talked with him, it was just like instant. I knew I was wanted to go there, and that's where I ended up. So, so that ended up being my PhD experience. And then I only applied to a few places for faculty jobs to become a professor because I applied a little bit early in my career. So I didn't know how successful I would be. So I didn't want to like apply at a bunch of places and kind of ruin my reputation. But USC was looking for somebody really in my area, so kind of tissue engineering type of area. And I think it was like right place, right time. So they ended up hiring me to really kind of start tissue engineering as an area of the department. So yeah, I've been here almost 10 years now. So we've really built it up a lot, and that's the story.
Wow, that's really amazing. It's so cool to hear your journey, like how long it took you to come from where you started and where you went and the decisions that went into that. That is really inspiring to hear as somebody who's also, just starting to think about college or just is approaching college and university and about to experience that journey as well. Sorry, go ahead.
I said, good, thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. So now we wanted to open it up to all the participants. So if there's any questions you were interested in asking about biomedical engineering or just generally being like in science in like a STEM field, the floor is open to everybody.